If you're an everydayer here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, you know we predicted the Pittsburgh Steelers first round move to get Broderick Jones and to be trading up and to hit the sweet spot of the 14th overall pick by trading with the Patriots. We'll break down why it was such a great move, what all went into it, what Broderick Jones can be, and what the board has left the Steelers at 32 and potentially 49, all right here on the Friday edition of the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things of the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is sponsored by Ultimate Football GM, the ultimate GM game that you can play right on your mobile device. Download the game by going to your local app store or going to ultimate-gm.com to play the game and be a GM that runs your own franchise. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On, all capital letters, in the game store. We'll get more details about that later. The reason, if you're watching on YouTube why I'm wearing sunglasses, is because here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, we predicted weeks ago, and then we reinforced all this week, the Steelers would be willing to trade up, would be looking to trade up. They'd want Broderick Jones. He was their guy. They were excited to take him. And that we even talked about, even this past week, that the Patriots at 14 were the best spot to do it. And by gosh, we were right. It's really hard to see in those. That's why I took them off now. But playing around, just having fun, because it's nice to take a victory lap. And when we get a pick right here in the first round, actually, I've predicted Devin Bush and Najee Harris right in the last four first round picks that they've made. So we're doing all right here. But let's get into why this was, I think, a home run of a pick for Omar Khan and a home run of a move. Because not only is the pick great, but the trade to get the pick was even greater. When we talked about this trade, we talked about this was going to be the one. This would be the trade that would require the least impact of all the reasonable spots that they could trade up at. We didn't think that they would be able to trade up with the Jets, because the Jets were going to want Broderick Jones at 15. They want an offensive tackle, and what's being swirled around as far as rumor town is that the Jets feel like they got ripped off because the Steelers moved ahead and took the guy that they were going to take at 15, which is again why we put the Steelers' value of trading up at the 14th overall pick. Now, here's what's great about this. If you remember, when we were doing this show with Alan Saunders earlier this week, we looked at the options here and looked at the trade charts and tried to look at something that would be favorable for New England to do this. And the trade values that we came up with was the Steelers giving up, trading the 17th pick over and then giving up the 80th pick while recouping the Patriots' 135th pick. So trading a third and getting back a fourth. So a pick swap there. Instead, the Steelers just gave up their fourth round pick, which by this chart here, the Patriots got the better value if they would have done it this way. But in the way that it actually played out, 4 of the 6 charts that we used in our calculator here on the trade charts with that charted out the value of the picks, 4 of the 6 charts say the Steelers got the better value as far as pick wise on the charts here, by the Steelers getting the 14th overall pick, the Patriots just getting the 120th overall pick. Now, here's the thing about that, though. I will say the Patriots probably were a little more okay, because they knew that the Steelers would be messing over the division rivals and taking away an offensive tackle who would probably be one of the best protectors for Aaron Rodgers moving forward, as the Jets made that trade. So I'm sure that Bill Belichick and the Patriots were totally fine with that. But either way, great value for Omar Khan. And we'll get into how the Steelers could have their cake and eat it too. If you look at how this board played out, we'll get into how Joey Porter and Brian Branch and all the different players that I have ranked that are really good, great value at 32 and maybe even at 49 if they fall there. But let's focus on Broderick Jones for a minute. This is the mauler. This is the guy who's the bully. This is the guy who you wanted to get because he was extremely athletic. He had the high motor on his team. Kirby Smart, his head coach at Georgia, was talking just before the draft about how Broderick Jones was one of the first guys that ran up to him after every practice and was like, Coach, what do I need to do here? What do I need to do there? Pushing and always asking, how can he get better? And telling how much he loves his coach and how he wants to work. That kind of mentality is what the Steelers want. They want a guy who's looking to love the game of football, looking to get better at the game of football. So you get a guy like Broderick Jones, who, when you look at how he plays, man, I think there's a lot of upside to a guy who's going to be 22 years old when the season begins next year, and a guy who. Or not this year, excuse me. When the season begins, he'll be 22 years old. He needs to polish his game a bit. He's not, I don't think he's not completely polished and everything. But I think with his upside, I think that he brings the traits that Mike Tomlin and Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach, can coach up. And here's why. The biggest knocks on Broderick Jones are his lack of consistency and polish, especially in pass protection. And one of the biggest notes, especially is with his hands, is oftentimes he punches too wide or too aggressively, or he overbears himself by being too aggressive, and sometimes needs to hone that back. But what is one of Mike Tomlin's sayings that he says all the time about players and what he prefers? I'd rather say whoa than sick 'em. Basically meaning I'd rather have to tell a guy to cool off and take it down a notch than have to try to motivate him to take it up a notch. Because it means that if you have that motor to play at that high level and to be that aggressive, we just might have to refine you a little bit and say, hey man, you don't have it all there just yet, but we like the attitude. And when you get it all there, we'll want that attitude. That's what the Steelers wanted out of TJ Watt when he came into camp his first time. He was frustrated he couldn't execute his pass rush moves because he didn't have that many pass rush moves. But you saw the tenacity, you saw the want to make the play. And then, of course, when he refined his pass rush moves, well, then he's just TJ Watt. I think Broderick Jones is very much, not saying he's TJ Watt, but he's very much that style of player. The guy who, you know what, when he there's plays where you see on tape when he does put it all together and he's in the right spot and he does the right things, he destroys his opponents. But there's times when he's just a little step oversteps, does something a little too much, a little too aggressive, not accurate with his hand placement, which I think is one of the biggest knocks on him, that he misses. But it's not for a lack of trying. It's not for lack of effort or, a need to push harder in a situation. I think it's just a matter of, hey, just a few things you got to shore up. When you look at Broderick Jones's stats, as far as, snap counts and what he did, he had 1,358 snaps at left tackle for Georgia, 930 this past year, 428 the year before. In those numbers, he gave up 2 sacks over those 2 years, allowed 3 quarterback hits, 12 quarterback hurries, and 17 pressures. But again, that's over 1,358 snaps. Mind you, though, by the way, those 2 sacks both came in his first year when he was starting at left tackle in 2021. No sacks came to Stetson Bennett under his watch in 2022. And I bet you believe that that's going to be really relieving news for Kenny Pickett when he lines up at left tackle next year, because I do think he is going to be the left tackle for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think it's going to be an interesting question. Where does Dan Moore Jr. go? What do they do with Chuks Okorafor? I think Broderick Jones, he's not going to just be handed the position. He's need to come in and play and compete. That's how the Steelers operate. I'm even sure that when mini camp opens and even training camp opens, Dan Moore Jr. is going to be running with the ones. But Mike Tomlin makes his guys earn it, just like he made Kenny Pickett earn it. And I think that's what Broderick Jones is going to do. The good news, though, is with his tools, I think he'll earn it pretty quickly. I think he can put it together. I think if it'll take a little bit of coaching to shore up some of his weak spots, but he seems like a very coachable guy. The notes that we've gotten on him, Mike Tomlin also said that, even last year when he went to Georgia's pro day and he took some of the Georgia players that were last year's prospects out to dinner, and he asked them, hey, who are some guys I need to know about for next year when I come back here that I'm going to be talking to and looking at? And he said all of them said Broderick Jones. And he said at the time, he's like, I don't even know who that guy is. Well, now he does, and he's glad he does. To me, this was a home run of a pick again. You got your offensive tackle. You got the right value for him. You didn't have to give up too much to get him. You still got both your second round picks, and you got your third round pick. You didn't lose a single day 2 pick, and you got one of your top offensive tackles. Huge win for the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my opinion. We'll have a lot more analysis to go on with this as we go on, but there's, of course, still more picks to be made. We'll get my thoughts on that, and I'll get you guys a look at my remaining players big board that the Steelers will be looking at as they currently sit with the 32nd overall pick, who the best options are there, what their best options might be, and how they can get the most out of the picks that they have remaining in this NFL draft and other potential trades that might be lurking around for Omar Khan. All that and more right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stay with us. We'll be right back talking about that. But first, before we do any of that, I want to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at Ultimate Football GM. Ultimate Football GM is the chance for you to be the GM who makes the decisions, how to manage the franchise. You're trying to bring a superstar dynasty to a franchise, to a city of your choice. You pick the city, you pick the team name, you pick the team colors, then you build the facilities, you hire the coaches, you fire whoever you want, build out your staff, draft your players, sign players, cut players, trade picks, do whatever you can to build your dynasty and win championships. I love the game. It's been a lot of fun to play. I'm working on my second GM stint. Each stint is 25 years. It's really fast to play. You can get done with the season in as fast as 5 minutes with how game this goes by, or how fast this game goes by. So get this game right now by going to ultimate-gm.com right now, or download the game in your app store that you can download for free to your phone or mobile device, or again, go to their website, ultimate-gm.com. When you download the game, be sure to go to the game store and then put in the code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On, all capital letters, all one word, and you'll get 100% free boost to your franchise stats to help build your dynasty today. So again, download the game by visiting ultimate-gm.com or look it up in your app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, and we're going to keep it rolling here on these picks. Now, again, I think Broderick Jones is the home run of the pick. I think that he was still my highest graded offensive tackle. Now, obviously, the board fell in a way that was a little different than a lot of people projected. Paris Johnson Jr. came off the board at 6. Darnell Wright came off the board at 10. And then Peter Skoronski came off the board at 11. So those were your first 3 offensive tackles. And Broderick Jones fell to 14. But again, I'm pretty sure the Steelers had to make that move because the Jets were going to take him at 15. It wouldn't have, and the Steelers might not have been messed up here. But here's the thing. If you're sitting there and thinking, well, you know, if they had just not taken Broderick Jones, if they had not traded up, they could have still got Christian Gonzalez because he fell to 17. I'm not so sure he would have, because imagine this scenario. The Patriots thinking, hey, we want some day 3 value and we want to get Christian Gonzalez, but we know the Jets want to get Broderick Jones. And we have a good idea that Christian Gonzalez might still be there at 17. What if we trade with the Steelers? But if they don't trade with the Steelers and they sit there, they could have drafted Christian Gonzalez at 14. The Jets would have drafted Broderick Jones at 15, and then the Commanders probably still draft Emmanuel Forbes at 16. And then you're sitting there, and you could have still gotten Joey Porter Jr. But as we see now, Joey Porter Jr. is available in the second round. To me, this was a very smart, adept move by Omar Khan in this front office. They knocked it out of the park, in my opinion, dodging what could have been a lot worse of a haul. And they could be in a position, like I said, where they could have their cake and eat it too. We talked about them needing to get where we evaluated against my evaluation. Again, we always say this. I say this every year when we talk about where I rank players, or where Todd McShay or Mel Kiper or anybody ranks players out there. Just because we rank them there is not how other teams rank them there. And other teams' boards may differ entirely. I mean, the Lions traded out of the 6th overall spot where they could have taken Paris Johnson Jr. or Christian Gonzalez or a number of players like Jalen Carter and a bunch of other guys. They traded down to 12 to take Jahmyr Gibbs. That is the most unpredictably crazy thing that I've seen in this NFL draft. But who knows? Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe Dan Campbell knows what he's doing there. But either way, the Steelers got in a position where we evaluated the top 3 offensive tackles. In my opinion, Broderick Jones was 1A, and along with Paris Johnson Jr. at your 1B. And the top 3 corners in my book were Witherspoon, Gonzalez, and Porter. And there were a lot of corners who went. It wasn't like it's not like Joey Porter Jr. There was just no cornerbacks taken. Devin Witherspoon went 5th overall to the Seahawks. Then Christian Gonzalez went 17th overall to the Patriots. Then Emmanuel Forbes went 16th overall to the Commanders. Then Christian Gonzalez to the Patriots at 17, and then Deonte Banks at 24 to the Giants. And that was it. So there were your first round picks there at cornerback. So Joey Porter Jr. sitting, and this could, like, if I would have told you guys that this was a possibility that they would be able to get both one of those top offensive tackles and one of those top cornerbacks, you would have called me a liar. But here they are, ready to go. And this was why I was saying it was probably worth getting one of these tackles and making sure you got in the front of this tackle class, because this cornerback class is so deep. Its offensive tackle class takes a sharp dip. But let's look at my big board that I have available. Now, if you remember, we went over the really big board I did of my top 92 players to consider for the first 2 days of the NFL draft. Well, what I did was I took the top 8 available players now available in the second round here after we've looked at things. So here's a look at them. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you can see it. I'll explain it out for our listeners on audio who can't see it right now. I still have Joey Porter Jr. as my top pick. I still think he's a very good player. I know that he slipped down here, but I think Joey Porter Jr. is absolutely a starting outside cornerback of the future. I think that he's physical. He's a kind of man press corner that you want. I think he'll be a dog for the Steelers if they get him. I think they're in a great spot there. So him being there, the Steelers could very much just walk up to the podium. They could have just left a note at the podium today and just said, "Hey, Roger Goodell, when y'all show up tomorrow, just read that slip and just move on to the next pick." But there's other talented players to observe here, and that could impact what their actual plan is. My number 2 pick player left, though, is tight end Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame. Now, I haven't talked much about Michael Mayer because I thought he'd be gone in the first round. I thought that the Steelers wouldn't take him at 17 or wherever that they would trade to, and that he would just be gone and we wouldn't have to consider him. But here he is in the second round, and I've told you guys a lot about how I think getting a playmaking tight end who can also block a bit and be physical in the run game could be a really good move for this offense to give them a 12 personnel option with Pat Freiermuth, who's more of a receiving tight end right now, still filling out his run blocking skills, and getting a run blocking tight end who can also be a playmaker on the field. Michael Mayer is, I think, a more complete player at that than the guy who I'm going to talk about in a couple spots here, and that's why I have him at number 2. Number 3, Brian Branch, safety, slot corner, everything DB from Alabama. The fact that he's here is also a big win for the Steelers. I think he's right up there with Joey Porter Jr. as a potential pick here. I think Meyer maybe less so, just because I think that looking at him and Darnell Washington being available. Darnell Washington also is my 4th ranked player I have here. Those two guys being available, maybe the Steelers look at that and they say we might be able to wait on tight end if we want to get tight end, and we need to fill out this secondary a little bit more with younger guys who can be part of the next generation of great football players for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Brian Branch, Joey Porter Jr., I think either of those guys at 32 would be such welcomed additions to this secondary. Joey Porter Jr. can line up on the outside. Brian Branch can line up in the slot, be a flexible guy that helps out at the safety position. And now you're in a place where you have Minkah Fitzpatrick, DeMonte Casey, Keanu Neal, and Brian Branch. That safety room gives you a lot of flexibility to do a lot of things. And Terrell Austin, I'm sure, would love to do a lot of things to cook up different schemes that can confuse quarterbacks, give you several different alignments, and cause some really challenging headaches for quarterbacks moving forward. But after Brian Branch, I have Darnell Washington at number 4, tight end. I think he's not as complete of a player as Michael Mayer right now, but I think his upside is high. I do think his ceiling is higher than Michael Mayer. When you look at his measurables, I think that that's the only reason he's ranked a little bit lower than Mayer right now. I think if the Steelers managed to take him, I think he could end up being a better tight end than Michael Mayer. But again, not right now. That's why I ranked him at 4. Then at 5, I have center John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. I think he's another guy who can be a perennial Pro Bowl type center with the way that he plays. I think he can be a captain on the offensive line. And who knows, maybe the Steelers look at it and they say, we really want to reshape this offensive line for the future. We got our offensive tackle that we think is going to be a superstar for the next 8 to 10 years. Let's get our center who we think is going to be a superstar for the next 8 to 10 years. So all that being said, I think that he could be a really talented player there. But they still have Julius Brents, who I rank 6th left on my big board for the Steelers, cornerback out of Kansas State. You've heard me talk about him a lot on this show. I think that he's really talented. He doesn't have the speed that Joey Porter Jr. has, but his speed's more comparable to Brian Branch. But I also think that Julius Brents is a guy who can mirror receivers really well. His technique is there. I think he's got the size. He's got a lot of things going for him. If he was the Steelers pick, I think he'd be more of a pick at 49th overall. But if they landed him, I think that'd still be a win at getting an addition to the cornerback room. Then at number 7 left on the board, I have Keanu Benton, defensive lineman out of Wisconsin. And it's a peculiar situation for him because with Mazai Smith going off the board, there aren't as many defensive linemen left who I think are going to be worthy of that pick. Brian Brzee went off the board as well. To the Saints, I believe, an interior defensive lineman. Kalijah Cansey's off the board. So now you have Keanu Benton, who's gone from there. Mazai Smith, who went to the Cowboys. And then we start to get down there. And then there's guys who are more edge rushers like Keon White and Felix Anudike-Uzomah went to the Chiefs. So he's off the board. You can look at other edge options like BJ Ojulari. Some people say out of Awore, out of Northwestern. Some people said he can play some interior. That's cool. But again, you're starting to split hairs with people who are natural to their positions. I think Keanu Benton's one of the last options there. That's why I have him ranked at 7. Loved his play in the Senior Bowl. Love his tape as well. Then my 8th guy is Osiris Torrance, an interior offensive lineman, purely a guard. We know that they've added to the guard position. I don't think he'd be their pick. He was a top 30 visit though, so that's something to keep a watch on. But he's just the guy I have next on my big board there that fits. I would have had DeJuan Jones there, but I highly doubt that they take an offensive tackle. But because I had him rated just a little higher than Osiris Torrance, but I think now with Broderick Jones being taken, I take DeJuan Jones off my board, and Osiris Torrance would take his place there. And if you're wondering who guys are after the top 8 there, I have Trenton Simpson coming in there after Osiris Torrance, followed by Kelly Ringo, Josh Downs, receiver out of North Carolina, Cam Smith, cornerback out of South Carolina, and then Joe Tippmann, center out of Wisconsin. So there's a lot of options here when you look at this big board and the top 8 concerns here. But let's talk about what might be the best option for the Steelers, either making the move here, because still tomorrow they have 3 picks. Well, not tomorrow. You're listening to watching this today. So Friday they have 3 picks that they could make here. They could get more if they trade back. They could stay put and get these guys. Let's talk about some of those options and what will work for them here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We'll keep this conversation going. But before we do any of that, we want to talk to you guys about our great sponsors at Built Bar. Built Bar is the #1 protein bar in America. And why? Because they're tasty and healthy for you, all one and the same. I know a lot of people say that, but these ones really are. They're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in so many different flavors that are all tasty. They just revealed a new peanut butter puff flavor that's really awesome, but you can get churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, double chocolate. There's so many different flavors that you got to just try. They have built.com where you can find all different flavors available to them. And no matter what the flavor, they're usually packing only around 130 calories, only packing 4 grams of sugar, but somehow fitting 17 grams of protein. So you're getting your gains of your protein without adding on any of the junk that's going to mess you up and get you out of your diet. You don't need to wait around for a box anymore either. For years, we've told you, go to built.com, order them, and they'll be delivered right to your door. Now you can walk right to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and pick them up yourself. In Walmart, you can walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. They have 4-bar boxes of flavors like cookies and cream, double chocolate, and coconut puffs. Or if you go to Sam's Club, run in and grab their 13-bar boxes with hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. Trust me, when you try Built Bars, you'll thank me later, because Built Bars are the #1 protein bars in America. Go try out some Built Bars today. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's keep this going here, and let's talk about what the Steelers need to do with this next pick. Now, I'm going to show this big board again just so you guys can keep visualizing the players that I'm talking about. But let's talk about the options here because they're sitting at 32. And we're going to go over some of the teams that are behind them right now. Right after them picking at 33 is the Cardinals, then the Lions, then the Colts. Now, part of something that factors into this is that there are two quarterbacks that I think everyone's talking about that are available right now. That's Will Levis, who fell out the first round, which we were a little concerned might happen. And there was Hendon Hooker, Tennessee quarterback. Now, here's the thing. There could be a market for teams that passed on these guys in the first round to be like, all right, we waited, we got our skill players, let's go get the quarterback of our future here. The question, though, is how much of a market could the Steelers draw up for that? Because, again, if you're looking at the Cardinals getting the pick right behind the Steelers, they don't need a quarterback. So the teams that the Steelers might have to like sell as far as being, quarterback hungry and saying, hey, get our pick to get ahead of them. Maybe the Lions, because they have Jared Goff at quarterback. The Lions are galaxy braining everything right now. They picked Jack Campbell and Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round. Never saw that coming. The Rams, maybe if they feel like Matt Stafford's too old. I doubt the Seahawks with the big number that they signed Geno Smith to. The Raiders could be a spot there because they picked Tyree Wilson and they didn't get a quarterback in the first round. So maybe they're a team that you want to get ahead of, but the Panthers don't need a quarterback. I doubt that at 39. I doubt that the Saints go get one. The Titans, maybe there's room that they're already tired of, or that they don't like Malik Willis and they don't, and they know they need to move on from Ryan Tannehill at some point. So maybe the Titans want to make that move. We know the Packers wouldn't at 42 because they have Jordan Love. The Jets have Aaron Rodgers, so I doubt they would at 43. Maybe the Falcons at 44. But you're getting my point here. There's not that many super hungry quarterback teams. Now, maybe, again, someone wants to trade up with the Steelers and get that, or get one of these options on the big board right now. Joey Porter Jr., Michael Mayer, Brian Branch, Darnell Washington, John Michael Schmitz. Either way, the Steelers might be fielding some calls. We've talked about this possibility and how the Steelers have been really advertising that they'll field some of these calls. I just don't know if it's going to be worth it when you got some guys here who I think are worth more than the 32nd overall pick in the draft. I think Joey Porter Jr. and Brian Branch and Michael Mayer are all guys that I felt should have gone in the first round, and that the Steelers don't need to overthink this right now. I'm telling you, just leave a note at the podium that says Joey Porter Jr. or Brian Branch, and just tell the NFL to read that when they open up the draft on Friday, and then you'll have your player, you'll have your second added man in the secondary, and a potential leader for the future. And again, if you're doubting Joey Porter Jr. because he only had one interception at Penn State, go back and look at the tape. Go look at how he was very often in position, and how he didn't allow a touchdown at all in his final year for Penn State. And he only was targeted 30 times because he was always in position. They were willing to go at other parts of his defense. Other parts of his defense, by the way, like Jair Brown, who are also in this draft. So, that being said, I think Joey Porter Jr., the Steelers are in a position where I think there's multiple guys they can feel very comfortable with walking up to the podium and just saying, yeah, we're taking that guy and we're going to take our best shots here at 49 and 80 later on. And give me your thoughts in the comments. Do you want it to be Joey Porter Jr.? Do you want it to be Brian Branch? Do you want it to be someone else, either on this board or not? But then's the interesting question. With whoever you take here, is it a chance that player falls to 49? Because now we're talking another 16 picks that the Steelers would have to account for. Or is it 15? I suck at math. I think it is 15. So we're talking another 15 picks that the Steelers would have to account for. I'm not so sure that you get that all these names on this board survive that. Maybe Julius Brents does. Maybe Keanu Benton does. I doubt Osiris Torrance. I feel like him and John Michael Schmitz will get snatched up at some point. Maybe Darnell Washington. I think with Michael Mayer there, that might be the tight end shield for if there's a tight end hungry team, they'll take Mayer before Washington, and then he might be there at 49. Also, crazy enough, Joey Porter Jr. and Darnell Washington, when you look at the Steelers and how they've handled things, they are two of the four players who the Steelers both visited with their top brass at their pro days and brought in as top 30 visits. The other two, who they did that with, Brian Brzee, who was picked at the end of the first round, and Broderick Jones, who was their first round pick. So, to me, this board could line up very well to just be, if the Steelers just stay pat, don't trade, don't move, you get Joey Porter Jr. with that 32nd overall pick. You get Darnell Washington at 49, hoping that Michael Myers, the tight end shield, for if there's a tight end hungry team, they take him. And then there's a run at all the other positions. Then you get Darnell Washington. And then bada bing, bada boom, you've nailed 3 picks that you feel very comfortable with, that you've both seen up close and personal at the pro days, brought in for interviews, you've liked them, and you've kept that relationship going with them. And then you take your swing at 80 and see what happens there. This draft has already been crazy with who's fallen to the second round. There could be some more craziness that comes with who falls to the third. And I wouldn't rule out the possibility of a double dip at cornerback. I think there's going to be a good run on cornerbacks in the second round. So maybe Julius Brents isn't around at 49. But if they pick Joey Porter Jr., they wouldn't necessarily need another outside corner. They need another slot. And at 80, a guy like Travius Hodges Tomlinson out of TCU, who is a smaller slot corner with good ball skills, he could fall to 80. Clark Phillips, Utah, love his ball skills. He could fall to 80. And then there's still Caillou Blue Kelly, who I think will be there available at 80. He's more of an outside corner, but still. So there's a lot and there's still Darius Rush as well. So again, there is depth there. And there's still plenty of other viable, really good options who the Steelers have brought in for top 30 visits. On top of the players on this list, you got Keon White, the defensive end / edge rusher out of Georgia Tech. You got Tyrese Stevenson, the cornerback out of Miami. You got interior offensive lineman Steve Avila out of TCU. Cody Mock, interior offensive lineman. He played offensive tackle for North Dakota State, but he's probably going to be a guard in the NFL. You got Chandler Zavala, another guard for NC State. Cedric Tillman, wide receiver for Tennessee. Tuli Tuipulotu, edge rusher for USC. Jaden Reed, wide receiver for Michigan State. Darius Rush, cornerback for South Carolina. Jonathan Mingo, wide receiver for Mississippi. All those guys, top 30 visits, who I think could be available at 80th overall if the board fell the right way. But like I said, leading into this first round pick, when we were talking about this, I thought it was very hard for the Steelers to be in a position where they would be pushed out of not being able to make a move this year. Not being able to get one of the top guys that they really wanted because they got the extra draft capital here with the trade giving Chicago Chase Claypool and getting their 32nd overall pick, which at the time wasn't that, but of course they kept losing, so it became that. I think they put themselves in a position where maybe another fall like that happens again, and one of those guys that we're talking about on this list, maybe they fall to 49, and then maybe another guy on their wish list falls to 80. But either way, the Steelers, I think, have put themselves in a very strong position of power. And the only way, and here's another thing here. I don't think the Steelers should trade down just to trade down at this point. I think they should be very comfortable to take Joey Porter Jr., Brian Branch. But if you're smart, and I think the Steelers have handled things very smart in this offseason process, especially in this draft process right now, you field calls. And if you're getting phone calls right now, you kind of play people off each other or play them off of yourself and just be like, you know what? Sure. Yeah, we'd love to get that. But you know what? We also really like Joey Porter Jr. We also really like Brian Branch. We also like this guy. And we're not sure if we trade down with you, if we're going to get that guy. So you have to give us proper value to make us come off of this pick or go somewhere else. And the Steelers can just be happy with who they pick. So in that way, you can maybe drive up a price. Maybe you get an extra day 2 pick, an extra day 3 pick. You can recoup a 4th-round pick for what you lost in the Patriots trade. Because here's one thing I do think that the Steelers are considering here as far as a potential trade and the options that are in front of them. With the 4th-round pick gone, their only day 3 picks are the 2 7th-round picks. Nothing in the 4th round, nothing in the 5th round, nothing in the 6th round, just 2 picks in the 7th round. And I do think that they probably value the idea of getting another pick back on day 3 to at least have a chance to address one of their needs or get a talent that they've talked to and they're really excited to maybe get there on day 3, whether it's the 4th, 5th, or 6th round before the 7th round comes. But I also don't think the Steelers are just going to give it away. I think that they're happy with being aggressive as they have been. They know that extra 2nd-round pick can kind of count for a better version of just a regular old 4th or 5th-round pick. So I don't think that they will give the pick away. I don't think they'll just trade down for nothing. I think they'll need to get really good value. And if they do, maybe we're talking about, who they get with that. Maybe Brian Branch continues to fall. I don't think he'll fall to 49. So I think that if he's not your pick at 32, he's falling out of there. And maybe if they pick him at 32, then Joey Porter Jr. goes after that. And then by 49, maybe a Julius Brents is available. Maybe one of those slot guys are available. But as a person who's we know how this team operates. We know that they believe in pedigree. We know that they believe in family lineage being important to the growth of young players. We know that Mike Tomlin's had a closer watch on Joey Porter Jr. because he just grew up around. They grew up. Their kids, his son grew up around him, and Joey Porter being a former Steeler, not just as a player but also as a coach and a coach under Mike Tomlin. There's obvious ties there. So I'm not so sure that the Steelers don't just say, you know what, we're just getting him. But I do think they'll keep their options open. And if they do, I think it would take a strong move from someone else that gives them really good value that'll make you say, you know what, that's okay. They got something really good out of this. And that's why they didn't just run up and take the 32nd overall pick and select Porter Jr. or Branch or whoever they take. But let me know who you think they should take at 32 and 49, or if you think that they should trade out of those spots, or if they should just stay put. A lot of different options here, but by and large, I think the Steelers, they did their job. They hit the home run on the first day. Let's see if they can hit a home run on the second day. I'm your host, Chris Carter, the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks so much for checking us out all week long. We will still have all the bonus content. We had bonus content of instant reactions, both by myself on this channel, but also I did some work with Jordan Black. She's one of our partners here at the Locked On Podcast Network. You can get all my thoughts on those previous videos. But we hope you enjoyed this Friday video that was more of our full episode. We'll have other shorter videos throughout the weekend detailing what the Steelers moves are, what the Steelers picks are. So stay tuned here on your favorite podcasting app or on YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to this channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes. Thanks again for checking us out. Chris Carter, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. I'll be back with you all weekend long as we continue to cover your Pittsburgh Steelers right here in the NFL Draft, right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.